Welcome everyone to Flyer Footy. My name is Matt Baker, and after a weekend off, primarily for the Club World Cup, Major League Soccer is back with a near full slate of midweek matches to play catch up with, and our St. Louis City SC resumes action in their match day 19 out of 34 against Orlando City SC. On this show, we have a full preview of that matchup where both teams are going to come into this off of about a week and a half of a break. We'll cover some news and notes, injury reports, and so much more from Monday's pre-match presser. But let's start with David Critchley. First, Lutz Pfannenstiel this past Sunday spoke to Tom Ackerman on KMOX and had some interesting comments about David Critchley's present and future with St. Louis City. He announced that Critchley will be remaining as head coach of St. Louis City SC through the 2025 season, and that after this season, when they hire their permanent head coach, Critchley will, quote, be a part of that conversation. This is a change in tone a little bit from the seemingly obvious caretaker tag they placed on him as manager right from the get-go, as he took over from Olaf Melberg to kind of right the ship, so to speak, in form, in system, in style. Critchley has impressed in these first three games, no doubt about that. Lutz had cited the player reaction, communication between the staff and between the players and the staff as some of the highlights, and what the club is excited about in Critchley taking charge of the first team for the remainder of the season. There's also some continuity to this. So one of the big things that Lutz wanted to, or at least he parlayed in this, is that he wants to take some of the uncertainty out of this. He wants to have consistency in what the players can expect and what the staff can expect. And he values that consistency and that continuity going into the season as they continue with their head coaching search. The head coaching search is obviously underway. That will continue. But David Critchley is the St. Louis City SC head coach for the remainder of the 2025 season. And if terminology is any indication, we might be able to say we're dropping the caretaker tag, because as of the pre-match press conference, David Critchley is now being referred to as the interim head coach. So whether it was just the English versus American translations, or if there's anything to it, we'll call David Critchley the interim manager from now on. So let's pivot over to the Orlando City SC preview. The history between these two teams is not that long. As is the case with most cross-conference opponents, St. Louis hasn't played Orlando in a couple of years, and thus we've only have one match against them in our history, a 2-1 defeat on August 26, 2023 in Orlando that saw both teams with double-digit shots, but just a combined 6 shots on target. If anyone remembers that match, Facundo Torres had a brace for Orlando, and Rasmus Alm was the lone goal scorer for City in that August 2023 matchup. Now, the silver lining when looking at this matchup compared to that one is that Facundo Torres is no longer an Orlando City SC player. He was sold to Palmeiras in Brazil's Serie A for around $14 million, where he scored 6 goals in 31 matches for them this year and is currently playing in the Club World Cup. He left Orlando as their all-time leading goal scorer, so we don't have him to worry about. Now, looking at Orlando as they come into this matchup, they sit 5th in the East with an 8-4-6 record, 30 points in 18 matches with 32 goals scored, 22 goals against, and a +10 goal differential. They are 3-2-4 away. That's 3 wins, 2 losses, 4 draws. Their last 3 matches, 1-0 win at Colorado on June 14th. Before that, a 3-1 loss against Chicago and a 3-2 loss at Atlanta. Now, a common theme for Orlando is bad luck or frustrations, basically leading to red cards this season a few times. And that loss to Atlanta was no different. Orlando had a 77-minute red card issued to Cesar Araujo, and they gave up 2 goals after that they cost them their winning position. Now, before those 2 losses, and that's why this red card is kind of noteworthy, before those 2 losses, they were on a 12-game unbeaten streak in all competitions, 11 in MLS and 1 in U.S. Open Cup. Then they had their 2 losses in MLS, their loss in the U.S. Open Cup. But in 5 of their 8 wins so far this season, they've scored 3 or more goals. Their last 3 goal or more match was over a month ago, though, in a 3-0 win against Inter Miami on May 17th. So it's been a bit since they've had a goal scoring output. However, 5 out of 8 is noteworthy in that they score a lot of goals when they win typically. In these 6 draws, 4 of them have been 0-0 scorelines. So a very hot, cold team when it comes to scoring. If they don't score, they tend to draw. And if they score a lot, they tend to win. On the road, though, they've only scored 3 goals once, and it was that Inter Miami win. So on the road, they have not been a high goal scoring team. Coming into this match, Orlando is fairly healthy. Duncan McGuire being their only injured player, at least as of before this break. We will get an injury update in the day leading up to the match. So Tuesday afternoon, be on the lookout. If you're listening to this ahead of time, be on the lookout Tuesday afternoon for the injury report officially. But we know Duncan McGuire is going to be out with a shoulder injury. He had surgery in early June on a labral repair in his left shoulder. He had 1 goal and 1 assist in 12 matches, but Duncan McGuire had been a notable star for Orlando in their attacking core. The other unavailability for Orlando is going to be Alex Freeman, their starting left back. He remains out as he's with the U.S. men's national team in the Gold Cup. He's started 3 straight matches for them so far, so this is obviously a big piece of their defensive puzzle that Orlando will be missing. Some of the big storylines that I'm following for Orlando City are the performance of their 3 designated players, Luis Muriel, Martin Ojeda, and Marco Pasalic. Ojeda leads them with 9 goals and 4 assists. Pasalic and Muriel both have 6 goals, and Pasalic has 4 assists too. So they are finding some critical production with their designated players. Now, Muriel and Ojeda are usually their 2 forwards. They typically run a 4-4-2, maybe a 4-2-3-1, but in this 4-4-2, Muriel and Ojeda, 2 of their DPs, are their starting forwards. Pasalic is a right-sided attacking midfielder, and so they get a lot of playing time and a lot of production from their designated players. They have a near top 10 defense and an offense which is among the best in the league in multiple areas. So they get the most out of their DPs. They have some significant production, and those 32 goals scored are top 10 in the league. They're no slouch when it comes to pouring on the goals. St. Louis City SC, we've talked about the Olaf Melberg tenure. We talked about David Critchley. We're well aware of those past 3 games, but this is a full season. So they come into this one 14th in the West still. 3 wins, 9 losses, 6 draws, a record on 15 points with 17 goals scored, 26 goals against, 2-3-4 at home, and are 1-1-1 under David Critchley. Their last few matches, we know them, but let's bring them back to the forefront. A 3-3 draw against the Galaxy on June 14th, the last time that either of these teams have played. A 2-1 loss at Portland the week before. You had a win against San Jose to start Critchley's tenure, 2-1. But in these 3 games, because I feel these are the most important games to watch for a myriad of reasons. In these 3 games, we have had 3 of our 6 highest expected goal outpourings, and those have been Critchley's 3 matches. So this team has somewhat had consistency, at least in a bettering of the attack, under David Critchley. We have had defensive and individual mistakes, and Critchley spoke to those in his Monday pre-match presser, talking about the need to limit those individual mistakes and shore up the defensive side of things while still having this positive outlook in the attack. These are their biggest suspect issues right now after allowing 3 goals and 2.7 XG against the league's worst team in the LA Galaxy. But overall, player confidence in the system and coach is back. It's high. Jay Reid spoke to this. The resiliency, the vibes are high is what he said on Monday when he spoke in the pre-match presser. So there's a lot of positivity coming out of this club that they're hoping to carry from before this little 10, 11-day break into the match. Now, player availability for St. Louis is still a concern. We heard on Monday and we saw at training, there's going to be a lot of players that remain out. We didn't get too healthy compared to what we were prior to this break. Edu Leuven will be out with a hamstring. Henry Kessler will be out with a hamstring. Rasmus Alm out with a hip injury. Joachim Nilsson out with a knee injury. And Thomas Ostrak appears out as well. Wasn't at training in the open Inside City training on Friday for season ticket holders. Wasn't at training on Monday that we saw. The nature of it isn't clear yet, but we can expect to be without Thomas Ostrak. And also David Critchley did not mention Thomas Ostrak in his midfield analysis, which I'll get to in just a minute. Chris Durkin with his knee. Oh, also, as we mentioned, Chris Durkin, we have to congratulate Chris Durkin for the birth of his child over the break. This was part of a lot of City player involvement or player excitement, rather, as Timo Baumgartel was married. Congratulations to him. Roman Berkey was engaged. We talk about that. Congratulations to him. And Durkin with the birth of a child. However, Durkin is still likely going to be out against Orlando. All David Critchley said on Monday regarding Chris Durkin is that they're going to be monitoring him over the next 72 hours, and he could get some time against Houston on Saturday. So no Durkin against Orlando, but we hope to have him back in some capacity away to Houston next weekend. Conrad Wallem, though, is a bit of good news. He was nursing a calf injury, and if you remember, he had to come out of the LA Galaxy match after just about 20 minutes or so in the second half, as he seemed to re-aggravate that calf injury. He was back in training, and Critchley said he will be available, though the specifics that Critchley said are, quote, wanting to get him some minutes. So I would temper expectations, especially in a starting role. This is going to be more of a cameo, trying to get him a run out and make sure that they don't re-aggravate that injury. As long as he gets the okay from the staff, as long as he's feeling well, Conrad Wallum should at least make some kind of an appearance. And this is helpful, and this is vitally important in some aspects for the midfield of St. Louis City. Conrad Wallum, like we talked about before, isn't really a fullback, though I would imagine that he could play there in a pinch. It's not ideal. He's a winger or a midfielder. And St. Louis is going to be struggling a bit in the midfield in this matchup against Orlando. David Critchley specified in Monday's press conference 5 players available for 3 midfield positions, as that's the positioning most ravaged by injuries. The 5 players that he mentioned were Marcel Hardle, Cedric Teuchert, Akil Watts, Alfredo Morales, and Jake Girdwood-Reich for 3 midfield positions, the attacking midfield, the 10, if you will, and then the double sixes, the central midfield spots. So the biggest storyline for me going into Orlando for St. Louis City is how will the injuries impact this team? The injuries we know are continuing to plague this group, and then the depth of this team, as I just mentioned, especially in that midfield. But this weekend, City across the board, when you're pulling players back like Hardle and Teuchert, or you're pulling them centrally to kind of fill that need, there are certain players that you have flexibility with, like Conrad Wallum. Maybe you need to use him more in a central midfield position as opposed to the attack, where he could offer a lot of value there on one of those wide roles. We talked about the player leaders on our mid-season episode last week. 2 things stand out to me from that as far as the biggest City storylines to follow. One is Marcel Hardle. Can he continue to be the difference maker? Because we talked about leading the team in touches. We talked about his expected assists and his contributions everywhere, leading the league in some of these expected assists, or in the top 5, rather, in the entire league in these expected assists category. But can he continue to produce? Because City's going to be relying on him so much more as these injuries continue to stack up and continue to be an issue. Playing 90 in the heat is going to be obviously needed, but will he be able to do that? And is that going to be something that City can afford to do with 2 matches back to back like this as they play catch up in this schedule? And the other player that I don't think we've talked a lot about, because he hasn't been a regular in the starting lineup before David Critchley took over, is Simon Bcher. Simon Bcher, can he finally get on the lucky side of things? Because he leads our team in, like I said on the last show, the goals added category overall, shooting in goals added, and is tied for first in the team in expected goals, but he only has 1 goal on the season. Given his propensity to find himself in the best positions to score, as we start this second half, Simon Bcher might be my player to watch, and the one player who could be the difference maker to increasing our goal scored output, because he is constantly putting himself in good positions to receive, good positions to score. The question is, can he actually finish? And if he's able to finish at the clip in which he's expected to, this team is going to turn those draws into wins very quickly. Styles of play between these 2 sides is not a yin and yang. In fact, there's a lot of similarities between St. Louis and Orlando City. Orlando likes creating long shot opportunities. They like creating chances through balls. They create a ton of scoring chances. They like to hit on the counterattack, on the counter press. They are successful in attacking set pieces, and they're pretty good in defending set pieces. So dead balls, situations, corner kicks, free kicks, those are going to be some notable things St. Louis has to up their game on, because defensively they have shown some weaknesses there in the recent past. Orlando, like I said, they like through balls. They will take a lot of shots. They attack through the middle, and their opponents play aggressively against them. And so they are willing to play on the counter press. St. Louis is very similar to a lot of this. They like to attack through the middle as well. They like to use long balls. They will attempt crosses, taking a lot of shots. So both of these, I mentioned the first game that they had in August of 23, double-digit shots. I'm expecting something similar to that. This is going to be an exciting matchup if the Heat allows it to be exciting on Wednesday night. Coming into this match for Orlando, they are 7th in Major League Soccer in goals scored and 6th in non-penalty expected goals, with a plus 1.8 goals minus XG difference. What this means, you don't have to memorize the stats. All you need to take away from this stat is Orlando is finishing a bit more often than the underlying stats say that they should be. They are overperforming their goals scored output, or their expected goals scored output. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, St. Louis. St. Louis is 28th in Major League Soccer out of 30 teams in goals scored, but 17th in non-penalty expected goals. And this non-penalty XG, that just means It means what it says. It's the XG when you take out penalty kicks. Penalty kicks add 0.79 XG every single time they're taken. And so they are so high, so obvious in what they add. I like this stat more because it really gives you an idea of the run of play, how these teams are performing. Now, 17th in non-penalty expected goals is a lot better than 28th in goals scored, but St. Louis is also 29th out of 30 teams with a minus 8.4 difference in that same stat I mentioned for Orlando. They are 29th out of 30 in non-penalty goals minus XG. So they are vastly underperforming what they should be producing as far as the underlying analytics say. Orlando averages 46.9% possession. St. Louis averages 44.4. So neither team averages 50%. Both teams are direct to goal. Orlando is tactically flexible and successful in multiple styles of play. They have, in fact, 8 total wins on the year, where 4 have come with less than 50% possession and 4 have come with more 50% or more. So they can win no matter if they have the ball, if they have to play on the counter. They're very flexible and successful at being flexible. The style, the formations that they run are going to be a 4-4-2 or a 4-2-3-1. They're going to play with 4 in the back. They're an explosive counterattacking team. They are aggressive in how direct they play once they force a turnover. They will counter press a lot. And so if they lose possession, they're going to force the envelope and regaining that possession, going to the advanced areas and going direct to goal afterwards. Since signing one of their designated players, Marco Pasalic, earlier in this season, their shot volume has jumped from 13.4 last season to 16 per game, while their touches to shot ratio has decreased from 13.7 to 8.9. This is one of my more fascinating facts about Orlando, because with Pasalic in the game, they have a much sharper direct approach and an increased speed to goal from how many touches they have that lead to shots. So their number of touches per possession that lead to a shot opportunity has dwindled significantly from last season. And their overall possession hasn't taken too big of a dip. They're just really efficient in the amount of times they're able to make this work. This is in the counter, but in possession, they also utilize overlapping fullbacks. So I mentioned they're going to have 4 in the back. They like to overlap their fullbacks. Their wingers are going to tuck inside. Midfielders push high. If you remember what I've talked about with David Critchley, in one of the underlying aspects, the fundamental things that he does with St. Louis City is getting more numbers higher up the field. You have your 2 center backs that spread wide. You use Roman Berkey as a third center back of sorts when you're in possession. You're pushing your fullbacks higher. You're pushing your midfield high, similar to what Orlando does. They push their fullbacks high. They get wide. Their attacking wingers will fold in, and then their midfielders push up. And so they love to get that same kind of space in the attacking half of the field that St. Louis under Critchley has been trying to do, throwing numbers into that attacking third. So the big questions I have for St. Louis going into this: will St. Louis City be able to balance handling Orlando's counter pressing and ability to successfully get numbers into the attacking third with their own desire to do the same? It's going to be a battle of wills, a battle of complementary styles, or a battle of conflicting styles, depending on how you look at it. Basically, both teams want to do the same thing. And so if Orlando is sending numbers high into the attacking half and they're trying to get the ball into that area, is St. Louis going to have to drop back, and vice versa? How is the chess game going to be managed between these coaches, and who is going to be successful in these 1v1 battles, or not even just these 1v1 battles, but one of the things David Critchley likes to do and has talked about is getting numerical advantages in different parts of the field. So will he drop back a little further and try to build from a midfield block, as opposed to trying to get numbers high and focusing on a high press? Where St. Louis presses, where their push points are going to be, and how they press is going to be really fascinating to watch, because this Orlando team is going to get so high so often and very quickly. Another question, not just for City in this match, but it's going to be the Heat. And this is one of those intangibles that you can't analyze too much. You just have to know it's going to be a factor. Orlando's no stranger to it. So this isn't like we're inviting Minnesota or Toronto or Vancouver or somebody down into the St. Louis Heat. It's swampy in southern Florida, in central Florida. And so the technical staff for St. Louis is going to be put to the test in how ready they've gotten our players, because honestly, we should expect Orlando to be prepped. We should expect Orlando to be used to the swampy heat and to almost feel comfortable compared to what they're used to when we play on Wednesday. Is that heat dome in St. Louis is going to be breaking a little bit, but it's still going to be muggy. It's still going to be oppressive to the players on the field. So along with these, with the heat, with the styles of play, how will City show after this break? And kind of Orlando too, because both teams have had the same kind of break, 11 days between matches. Klaus, can he continue his look after his record-breaking first hat trick in St. Louis City history? Will the defense continue to have these individual mistakes? Will what David Critchley talked about actually apply and work and correct? And can we see improvement in the way our defense shows? Because honestly, one of the biggest questions I have with the defense isn't the starting level of players, Jay Reed by himself, Thomas Totland by himself, Timo Baumgartel. It's our reserves. It's our depth. Looking at Kyle Hebert, looking at Joey Zielinski, looking at some of the midfielders, Jake Girdwood-Reich even. Girdwood-Reich has been good in his appearances, but can all these pieces hold in the second half? Because that's where this game's going to be won and lost, when we have to have second half adjustments. The heat is going to make the tactical changes so important, because you're not going to be able to leverage 80, 90 minutes as much as you probably would have otherwise, all things considered. That's one of the reasons why the heat is going to be so notable, is how long can some of these players go? When do you need to make the changes? And can you rely on our backups to not make these individual mistakes that they've shown a slight propensity to in the past? And it's hit or miss. So it's not like we have no faith in Joey Zielinski. Quite the opposite. In fact, we just want some of these mistakes to be learned from. Jay Reed even mentioned one of them at Monday's press conference, talking about when he slipped on the field after the Zielinski pass against the Galaxy, and he helped basically to give up a goal. Talking about the first step in that should have been to clear the ball, to send it into the stands, as opposed to trying and play and trying to get too fancy. Be a little more conservative with these approaches as opposed to trying too hard. That's something that the players have clearly learned from, and so you want to see what happened in the Galaxy game, learn from those mistakes 11 days later. Predicted starting 11, because there's a lot of questions concerning the depth, but I think there are a few questions when it comes to what a likely starting 11 is for St. Louis. You got Roman Berkey in net. That's pretty obvious. And I kind of think our back line is pretty set. With no Henry Kessler, no Joachim Nilsson, you're probably looking at Jay Reed, Timo Baumgartel, Kyle Hebert, and Thomas Totland. Jay Reed is basically our only left back. I haven't even talked about Jonas Horn yet, but the fact is that Jonas Horn he was officially announced as being signed by Rapid Wien in the Austrian Bundesliga. David Critchley on Monday said that Jonas Horn is back with the team, is training, but he's unlikely to feature for the rest of the month. There are 2 matches left in the month of June, if my math is correct. It might even be 3, but the next ones are Orlando and Houston before the loan is officially over. And David Critchley didn't sound like he was having that we were likely to see Jonas Horn. So don't expect to see Jonas Horn, because Critchley is focused on players who are going to be here, remain here, and who he can build from there, though Horn is in practice. So all that goes back to Jay Reed is basically our only left back on this roster, especially with Conrad Wallem not available and him not being a fullback. Jay Reed at left back is a lock. Thomas Totland at right back is a lock. Timo Baumgartel and probably Kyle Hebert at center back. Midfield, I mentioned our midfield woes, and so we don't have very many options. I'm going with Alfredo Morales and Akil Watts as our midfield duo to start the game. You have JGR who can sub in later. You have Marcel Hardle who can drop back if you need to, but Alfredo Morales and Akil Watts to start for me. And then our attacking quartet, if you will, Celio on the left, Marcel Hardle centrally. I've got Simon Bcher on the right and Klaus up top. I really like what we saw with Bcher and Klaus in the rest defense, having Bcher on the right and then leveraging Bcher to move in a more advanced position, playing off of Klaus. I think what Klaus is doing is benefited by Bcher being on the field, and they just seem to have that on-field chemistry just like they do off the field. I would love to see more coffee sips by Klaus and Bcher and whoever else feels like joining them. Toy Shirt is obviously the other option in the attack, and very likely, if he doesn't start, he'll feature significantly, probably around the 60th minute mark, barring any injuries. So this 4-2-3-1, I think, is probably one of the strongest that we can run out, especially with what we've seen from Critchley's side right before this break. Now, the betting odds for this one, if you're into that, Orlando's favored. And it's 5th in the East versus 14th in the West. It's not that surprising. Orlando is one of 2 visiting teams to be favored this much, with Cincinnati away at Montreal, the other visiting team being heavily favored. A plus 190 for St. Louis, a plus 260 for the draw, and a plus 130 for Orlando as of Monday afternoon when I'm recording this. I think we're looking at a 2-1 win for St. Louis. Is that optimistic? Absolutely. Is it overly optimistic? I don't think so. I think we've seen enough positivity from St. Louis. We've seen enough evolution and getting back to the basics from what we had versus Olaf that there's a lot to be confident and positive about. But ultimately, this is after an 11-day layoff. And so with the Heat, really anything could go in this. It could go any way. I'm interested in your reactions as you listen to this, as you hear this. Drop us some comments on social media. Ask us any questions in the lead up to the game at FlyverFooty or at Matt Baker STL. I'm happy to answer them. That's all we have for this preview of Orlando City, St. Louis City SC on FlyverFooty. Wednesday night is the kick. 7:39 is the official kick. And thanks for tuning in. We appreciate you listening to us. Our crew will be back later this week. Phil, Santi, Stu, myself, 1, 2, or 3 of us 4. So we appreciate you listening. If you haven't already subscribed, please do to either YouTube and or a podcast. Multiple episodes a week. We're still back doing this. Haven't stopped with the break. Aren't going to stop. Aren't going to slow down. So we just hope the city wins and we have more positivity to talk about. For now, I'm Matt Baker. Thanks for joining me on FlyverFooty, and go City.